I think we're ready for another code challenge. This is going to be built upon a code we did earlier called Lucky 50. Let's pull over our previous code, Lucky 50, and look at what we did at that point. We had generated a random number between the range of 1 and 100, and we checked if the random number was equivalent to 50, we printed Lucky 50, else we had other statements. Now in this challenge today, we've created a new file, Lucky 50 more. What we're going to do today is in an update to this program, we're going to run the code till it is Lucky 50. Okay, so we don't know how many times it will take, but till we don't get Lucky 50, we keep running it. And then we want to keep a count that how many times it takes to get to 50. The third thing we will do is we will do this step 10 times and maintain the count that it took each time to get to 50. And then we will also look at what is the minimum and maximum times that it took us to get to Lucky 50. The moment we're looking at a problem statement, what is the first thing you need to do is just look at each and every step and see how would you approach it. If you can especially relate the problem to the way you would approach it if you were doing it without computing, that can really help you think through well. So in this case, imagine if you were just, between you and your friend, if like you had a dice and say you had to get to a particular number, one of you will decide to keep a count and one person will throw the dice and you keep counting till you get, say, 6. Once you get the 6, now because you have to do this 10 times, you're not going to be able to remember it. So you're going to write it down somewhere. So you do this to 10 times and eventually what you have a list. And from that list, now when you have that data available, you can do many things with it. So we need to run the code until we reach 50. So that means we want to run a loop, something which we should do again and again. This loop should run based on a condition. What we're going to be using is a while loop. So while loop basically runs till it meets a certain condition. So we can look at the syntax of it. Since we already had our Lucky 50 code ready and opened up on our editor, we can, if we want, copy the code or we can type it out. So we're generating a random number and we want to run this in a loop. So how does this while loop run? So it runs while, and then you have to put the condition. So what is the condition we're looking at? We're looking at while get lucky. Now this variable won't show up because get lucky is not yet defined. So initially we need to define it something. So is it okay and safe to say initially it is just 0? So what we're saying is that while get lucky is not equal to 50. And just like the way we would talk, we will say, okay, while raining, we are going to always carry the umbrella. So that applies. Once it stops raining, we no longer need to carry umbrella. Now, in a similar way, while get lucky is not equal to 15, we are going to end it with a colon. And what we're going to do here, we are going to generate the random number while it is not equal to 50. So we'll keep generating it. So that takes care of the first piece of code. Should we run and see what happens? Okay, so do you see what happened? It says name error, name random is not defined. Why that happened? Because we have not imported random, rerun. So did you see? It started to generate random number, 47, 20, 86. So it's going all over, kept on and on. At one point, finally generated in 50. And that is where this condition, get lucky, not equal to 50. This condition is no more true, right? The loop is over. Let us now look at the second part. We will keep the count it takes to get to Lucky 50. So this is the part which you can definitely do yourself. You can pause here now, get comfortable with this while loop, put the condition, get this much done, and then go ahead and implement the second part where you want to keep a count to get to Lucky 50. Come right back after that. How's it been for you? Were you able to get the counter working all right? Let's look at how we did it. So we took a counter to get lucky and we initialized it to 0. This is before the while loop. Inside the loop, every time we generated a random number, we added 1 to it. So it's like every time counting 1, 2, 3, 4. So we just kept keeping the counter up. Once we hit 50, that means the loop is over. So when we come out of the loop, we have printed, we get lucky, but it took us these many times. If we run and see, we'll see every time It will tell us how many times it took us to reach the 50. And we do not want too many prints. At this point, we can comment it out. And we're sure, once we are sure the code is working. But till you're not sure, it is best to keep the print on. So if you want to add something, if you want to keep updating a particular variable, instead of rewriting it again, there's another simpler operator to do it. The operator is plus equal to. What this syntax means that it will take this variable to the same variable, it will add 1. We have our step 2 implemented. Now what is step 3? We will do this 10 times and maintain the count that it took each time. Now if you want to do something 10 times, what does it mean? Loop, is that your answer? Then you're right. We are again going to run a loop. This entire thing needs to be run again and again. 10 times we want to keep running the code till we get to a 50. When we know a fixed number of times we want to run something, the loop which we can use is the for loop. Okay, and remember we have used this before, but let's look at it when we want to run it for a fixed number of times. Now the syntax of the for loop is that for loop, and then there is a variable. So if we take a variable, we are choosing the variable luck loop and we want to run it 10 times. So we are going to learn and use a new function which is called range. Now this range function basically helps you take a range between two values. By default, it starts from 0 and goes till wherever you want to, or you can specify start and stop. So we are going to use two arguments as we call the range function, that is 1 to 11, because remember, by now you may have understood that a lot of arguments, they include the first one but they exclude the last value. So it's going to be 1 to 10. Now this for loop of course has to end in a colon, and what should happen, all this has to come inside by 1. So what I just did, I selected all of it and I pressed on tab. Now when we run it, it took 53 times, 195 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's run exactly 10 times. But obviously don't want to count it. So why don't we just write every time the counter? So it took us get lucky counter times. So we run this now. So it tells us which loop, how many times. Now we have this data printed here, but we want to be able to do certain more operations. So what we have been asked is to maintain the count somewhere. You have to store it somewhere. And now you know what should come into picture. It would be a list. We're calling it luck loop list. And how do we define empty list? We can just put square brackets. This is where we have defined a list. When do we want to append it? Do we want to do it every time, or do we want to do it only once we have 50? So where should that come? Should it come inside the while loop? This is something which the new learners really get confused. Which loop, where the code has to come. In this case, the get lucky counter should be added to the luck loop list only once we have reached 50. So here we are printing it. Maybe after printing, we can add it to the list. We will just append. And what are we appending? Get lucky counter. So let's print the list also. We are printing the list every time so that we can see the list growing. So first time when it ran, it took 11 times. So it added 11 to the list. Next time, it took 103 times. So it added 103 to this list. It kept adding till eventually it has a list of 10 numbers. Let me just call out some of the common mistakes which people end up making is that they may keep the initializations like here get lucky and get lucky counter outside the for loop. So what would happen because of that? Once you have reached 50, say it took you 70 times, but because you're not initializing it to 0, next time when it runs, it will start the count from 71. So your counter will keep getting up and up. So watch out for these kind of issues and pay attention to what you're printing and make sure that it's correct. So are we ready to jump into the fourth one? Print the minimum and maximum times that it took. Now, how would you do that? If you have a small number of lists like you do 10, and if you were doing it on paper, you would have physically examined, likely detect easily which one is lowest and which one is highest. But of course, it was a longer list and then your physical examination wouldn't have worked and you would have had to figure out some method to do it. What are the different methods to do? You may have tried to, maybe you would have tried to circle everything which is less than 10 and then look at it. If there's nothing, then look at between 10 to 20, circle each of them and then look at it. Now, one technique which in your physical thing you wouldn't have achieved, but in coding you have, is that you have all these ready-made methods provided by your libraries. Because list is such a powerful data type, you should definitely explore what are the features list provides. And we look at list, one of the things it definitely has is sort. That may be helpful, right? Because if you sort it, and let's print the sorted list. So this is the initial print, and then it's sorted and gave you the next time. Now here you're sure 8 is minimum and 247 is maximum. And do you know how to get the first element and the last element? You can refer back where we learned how to do that, or hopefully you have created a nice large table where we discuss indexing, 0th index, and this would be the last index, which you can refer to as -1. So that's how you can get minimum and maximum. Now, interestingly, min and max built-in function provided by Python library. Now, what does that mean? If I give here minimum, so minimum count, let us run and see this. So it was able to print the minimum. Max count, now this min and max, they are pretty much going to take most of your data types and do this work for you. So it's printed your minimum and maximum. Can you find out if it took the same number of times to reach 50? We want you to look at how you figure out if there are duplicates in the list.